So where did Gaia actually fit in with the worship of the ancient Greeks? Was she top of the pile or somewhere else?
So shockingly, not really. Not really. You would think for the creator of many beings, not all beings, but for many beings, she really wasn't in there a lot. Like for a moment she was. And then she sort of got, I think this makes a lot of sense. It feels like she sort of got pushed aside in favor of Demeter, however you want to say it.
Right.
Because it makes sense. Goddess of like the harvest and everything is a wee bit more important to the everyday person. And so Gaia, while around, and there were cults, and there are still folks that practice with her as the focus, my experience and research didn't really show her as being a big part of that. She sort of was in the birth. That was it. But, maybe I didn't find some of them, but I think that she doesn't strike me as somebody who was really big, although she was such an important part of everything. And that is really common, I'm finding, in Greek mythology. Hestia is the same way. Hestia is like in all of the daily sort of things of Greek culture a lot of the times, but has nothing written about, like barely anything written about her.
I'm going to show off now because I've just come back from Athens.
Oh.
We spent a week in Athens. And I'm just thinking of all of the and there are lots of statues. There wasn't any. Well, I didn't see any of Gaia or Hestia, actually.
Nope.
Aphrodite, lots of Aphrodite.
Of course. She's everywhere. I don't think she would stand for anything else.
Not one of Gaia at all in any of the ancient sites that we visited. And I hadn't thought about that until just sitting here now listening to you say that.
Well, and I think it's one of those things, or at least this is my hypothesis, that if the deity is a part of everything, like you're worshiping in every moment. Like there's not a way, like you don't have to separate it because it's everywhere. Like Gaia is all of this. Hestia is every flame, is every heart.
Yes.
So I'm finding this, like how all these little pieces fit together, just a really fascinating.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there were lots of Aphrodite. You could tell her statues. They were quite pert.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
Yes.
I haven't been yet, so I will.
Without looking at the plaques, you could tell her.
She likes the attention.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that actually until you said it. And for someone that we think of now as such an important deity as Gaia, yeah, but it actually makes sense. As you say, if she is part of everything.
I think a lot of things to think about with deity is context, right? Like it's not just about like their stories, but it's the context in which they first arose and where they were sort of maintained and written about. Because I think a lot of times we situate gods in the modern world and we're like, well, we would do it like this.
And we've kind of gone ahead of ourselves because Gaia she was the creation story.
Yes, she birthed many beings and then birthed many beings with some of her sons. And
we love a good old Greek myth. Yeah,
the Greeks are awesome. They are so messy and I love it. I think they're messy, but she birthed like Uranus, like the sky, and she birthed the Titans and birthed the sea, and then laid with Uranus and birthed more folks and the sea and more folks, and birthed monsters and birthed
not just human beings, then monsters as well. She's quite multi-talented.
She's multi-talented, very busy, and also like so many Greeks too, it's so easy to say Mother Earth is such an amazing being and just so like perfect and without flaw. And same thing with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Gaia got ticked off that Uranus didn't like one of their sons because he turned out to be a beast, and then tried to get Uranus castrated and succeeded. So she's a complicated being, and not just like I birthed all the things, but now I'm going to hurt them.
So is there a way, I mean, the Greek stories they are fascinating, aren't they? They are so far removed
They're
from
busy.
what we kind of see now, is there a way of learning from those stories and reflecting them to modern times?
I think for me, the best things that we can learn from, I think, any stories. But let's talk about the Greeks specifically. Your choices have an impact. That's a big one in Greek. I think we can also learn to pause before reacting.
That's been one of my particular difficult ones to learn. Yep.
Same. And also, I think a lot of Greek stories seem, at least the way they're written down, make sure you have the whole story before you act. I think that a lot of miscommunication, but the way I learn from stories the most is to read them and situate myself in them and sort of see like what was going on from the viewpoint of this being in the story. What was going on from the perspective of Hades? Like if we're talking about Persephone, Demeter, and Hades, what was Hades thinking? What was Persephone thinking? What was Demeter thinking? And when we can sort of step through different perspectives, I think it really helps us to not only understand them, but understand ourselves and the way that we might show up or not. So I think story is the beginning of the relationship too. It's the gossip that we hear about the gods until we get to know them better.
But I think in any situation, there is always two sides to a story, sometimes three,
More.
sometimes four. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So that makes absolute sense. And as we said earlier, there's so much misconception out there. It is so easy to get dragged in.
It's easy to get dragged in. And also, one thing to remember with a lot of Greek mythology is that it's translated mostly by white academic men. And so that gives its own lens. We can just say that. It will give a lens, and it's something I talk about ad nauseum in my books. There are some more female translations coming out. And so the Iliad and the Odyssey have now been translated by Emily Wilson. Sorry. Apologize if it's one of those. So she's done those, which are great. And I think that the more we have of that, the more the stories are actually going to unfold in different ways.
Yeah, it makes a difference. The translations, they do. Some does get lost in translation, doesn't it?
Or misplaced.
Yeah.
Like,
Gaia plays a huge part in nature, obviously, and in the planet Earth. Are there specific areas that she's more associated with? So could we go to a rocky place to connect with her, or trees, or does it not matter?
Personally, I say it doesn't matter. And I would also say that she's often sort of called she's called the goddess of elemental earth. So like soil and rocks and stones and caverns. So you will often find stories of her being, of beings being hidden in like the caverns of Gaia, or being punished in the caverns of Gaia, as it were. But sort of, like Zeus was hidden away. So there's almost this idea that her elemental pieces or attributes are stories of folks being hidden or like protected in the chasms of Gaia, some for protection, some for punishment. But I would say that part of this is not to say that she's in one place, because she's not. She's in all the different places. But one of the things that's important about this cavern chasm thing that I came up with as I was thinking about this podcast, caverns, chasms are made out of rocks, right? And rocks started as organic matter and at their core, but then they are formed and changed and shifted by pressure and time. Aren't we all?
Oh, yes. Sometimes wittingly, sometimes not.
Right. And so I think that, the whole question of like, is she connected with one thing? Yes. And I think that she's pretty much everywhere. She's in all of the beings and the green and the rock and the stone. And I think that that's one of the reasons why she can be sometimes intimidating and sometimes hard to see, because if she's in everything.
There's no specific one place. Yeah.
We humans like to focus. We like to focus and sort of say, oh, you're there.
Yep.
And she's everywhere.